Howdy. Today is a special day. It's the shortest day of the year. Winter solstice. And I finally managed to get this Peat paper done in a way I wanted to publish or bring it out today. So here it is on Academia, the plate tectonic issues, the influence of electricity in rock forming processes and the coherent connection between science, mythology and history of Finland, part 3. They say that a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, but it is not half so bad as a lot of ignorance. Terry Pratchett. Figure 1. For those who have the eyes to see, a coffee mug with petroglyphs made by Pentic in the middle. To the left, a finished brimstone, and to the right we see a beautiful example of mineral facies. Or facies, however you want to call it. So this paper is more or less about peat, comparison of different theories about peat and other contradictions in modern science, creation and accreation of peat from a new perspective, peat's active role in the environment and the end of the last ice age, cultural rituals and mythological stories revolving around peat, conclusions and references. I will put a link below to Academia where you can find it. And let's just scroll down here a bit. We are talking, I'm showing people, which should everybody know about, scientist or not. There aren't too many pictures in this. Now let's just have a quick read about part of it. Chapter number 3. Creation and accreation of peat from a new perspective. Let's go back in time, let's say 7,000 years or so. Some parts of Earth were covered by ice and snow, but there were also vast forests and grasslands that covered the surface of the Earth. Huge herds of animals fed on the abundant food sources. Some settlements of people were found rather sparsely contributed over the landscape. This assumption could be totally wrong. The amount of people, the size and amount of settlements could have been much bigger than anyone ever could imagine. It is mainly based on archaeological findings within the paradigm of consensus theory, but is not a crucial part of this paper to discuss whether there were many and sophisticated cultures present or not. We are treating all animals, people and plants equally as biomass because all biomass on Earth is based on carbon. In a study of the inorganic chemistry of peat in the Okavango Delta system in Botswana is stated about the origin of inorganic matter. Quote, allochthonous kaolinite 40% and quartz 20%, and both allochthonous and autochthonous phytolithic silica 30%. Several inorganic components, iron, potassium, P, phosphorus maybe, salt, calcium, magnesium, which make up the remaining 10% are associated with the organic fraction. It is important to understand what the words allochthonous and autochthonous mean in order to point out something significant. Autochthonous means that the minerals were found at the same place as they were formed. They were created in situ. Allochthonous, for those who have seen some of my videos, you probably are familiar with this allochthonous word. Allochthonous, on the other hand, means that they were formed somewhere else. In other words, they don't know where they came from. The term for something in between is parachthonous. Despite this not being relevant, the author likes to mention it here and for the sake of completeness, and it is a funny word after all. Phytolithic silica is still an unsolved problem in botany. plants somehow create cell-sized or even several cell-sized combined-sized silica deposits that also have the form of a cell. For reasons for why or how exactly it happens remains unclear. The reason for why or how it exactly happens remains unclear. Yeah, you can check out the reference lists. These parts of plants have CO2 and other chemical compounds stored within this piece of silica. Because it is silica, it does not decay for thousands of years. I mean, by weathering or something, it's very, very hard. As earlier mentioned, we have 30% silica and also 20% quartz in peat. At least in this particular case, quartz and silica are the same material, so why are they mentioned this way? The difference between the two lies in the arrangement of the atoms. Silica is amorphous and quartz crystalline. The easiest way to explain the difference between the two is the production of glass. Quartz-rich sand or quarried quartz, rock quartz, gets heated up to about 1700 degrees, the melting point of quartz, by which the crystalline structure disappears and gets clear. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to watch out of the window due to the refraction of the crystalline structure of quartz. Of course, the process of glass making is much more complex. Many other things take place, like taking out impurities and adding chemicals, which is basically just changing the impurities in order to make the melting point lower. The final properties of glass can also be influenced by the cooling process, either slow or fast. Some glass is also chemically treated in order to get a very hard surface. This process is called ion exchange process, which exchanges sodium ions with potassium ions in a salty solution. Most glass produced is a mixture of three main ingredients and therefore called soda lime glass or water glass. Anyway, you can read the rest. It is not that long, but there are also not too many pictures in this. Let's just have a look at a few pictures. That's probably a quartzite piece which has metal inside. And then we have this electric or electromagnetic wave. I have shown this already in some videos earlier. I think so. Yeah, in some paper, I don't know if it's in my paper, in this particular paper we are watching at, but in one paper I found these kind of structures in the ground are considered or called gravity worms. Yes, if I would read some or write something like this, I don't know. Maybe some of you wouldn't really like it. Gravity worms. It almost seems like that you have to be already a professor in order to come up with something like gravity worms in order not to sound ridiculous. No up or down. Then we have fulgurites in the ground, or deposits in fulgurite shapes. The author would like to express his admiration and respect towards engineers of all kinds, because they are the ones making these kinds of discoveries possible in the first place. Thank you. The great technical achievement also reflects the impossibility of ancient people who would have known about such mineral or metal occurrences. Yeah, because they just didn't have ground-penetrating radar and stuff. Still, their tales match the creation process of the geological features better than the prominent geological theory. Just think about the Revontulet, the foxfires, aka the aurora, The ancient knew about static electricity at least. Yeah, there is some numbers even in this paper. Not too many because, I'm not really into numbers. We have Billy Elverton making experiments, a comparison between peatland from Finland and the laboratory experiment including electricity and iron dust. Similar patterns are visible. It seems that in some peatlands the floating particles are forming daisy chains. The YouTube channel from Billy Elverton has many very interesting electric discharge experiment videos. We have also see the pattern featured here. Yeah, you can really learn things on YouTube. A comparison of craters made in the laboratory and similar craters in peatlands somewhere in Russia. I probably never would find this place again. Note that the satellite picture is one picture, which means those craters are neighbors. That's one picture here in the background. This is just one in the middle. The YouTube channel See the Pattern made a very nice video about craters from electric discharges. You will find this video when you just go to the reference 55. It would be cool if you would respond once. Yeah, Garrett, if you watch this video, answer. This image shows peat in calcareous regions somewhere in Russia. Yeah, once again, it is easy to see that the ground beneath the peat layer is white. And maybe this has to do something with the white rivers, which I have been writing about in the previous paper, mountain water. Yeah. This isn't, this title should be maybe on the next page. I don't know why it's done like that. I tried to arrange them. Cultural rituals and mythological stories revolving around peat. The modern Western society has certain annual festivals. Some are tied to Christian beliefs, but some are of pagan origin. Maybe. Whatever the case may be, they all share one thing. They are heavily monetized. The original meaning or purpose got lost a long time ago. The story got reinvented and changed to fit certain religious paradigms. This also functions as a wiping out of ancient knowledge for common people. A further tool to achieve a similar result is education. Uniformitarianism has its origin in England. It is the cradle of settled science on which mainstream science is based upon. Oxfordian science is very tightly connected to Christian beliefs. The origin of the peer review process also originates in England. It was invented to make sure the results of whatever scientific discovery don't give any possibility to question Christianity, the king, queen, or whatever else artificial authority. Still, as kids, we are awaiting Christmas time. In spring, we celebrate Easter and occasionally other days of school because the church wants it to. The author hasn't been raised in any specific religious frame, and only because of certain rules of authorities, time in churches were spent. It always felt strange to participate in these rituals because they didn't seem to be from this world. Stories got told, rules explained, and ritualistic procedures were performed. Over time, the author learned that there are also other religions. Later, it turned out that they fight with each other, basically since the day they were founded, despite promoting that peace is the ultimate thing to achieve. For the author, the amount of contradictions, outer-worldly story, and the rigorous defense system of each religion towards the others always posed a very big problem. It simply didn't make any sense. Discovering the electric universe with all the people and their works, which were leading up to the point of where it is now, opened up a whole new way of looking at things. It is such a unifying theory that it seems too much for too many. There seems to be a deep rooted fear to let go of old beliefs and embrace new ones. Almost no amount of contradictions is enough to let go. Rather believe in something that got taught in school as an absolute truth than in something which is understood and thought about. Let's take Halloween as an example of an ancient cult embraced by capitalism and maybe even kept alive by it. Many people don't really know what Halloween is about. Yeah, there's Randall Carlson talking about that too. He is in the reference list. They know that at the time in the year, scary faces are carved into pumpkins and that there should be a candle burning in the pumpkin in order to make it visible in the dark. The only time of the year when you can see witches. But why? A scary pumpkin glowing in the dark? Witches? Most people never took the time to actually think about things like this. Too many don't even want to know, and they will have an excuse for it, which, after all, it could be quite likely be rooted in fear. They lack the ability to be honest to themselves and admit that they were wrong or the new knowledge would partially destroy their worldview. It is important to understand that the old knowledge doesn't go away. It will remain and it can be processed in new different ways. Once you start to see, you can't unsee it anymore because the forms and patterns, visual or literal, are omnipresent. As I explained in part 2, light phenomena in nature might have been much more common in ancient days, and very often they seem to be related to plasma. 50% of swamps in Finland are drained. This number could be much higher or bigger in other countries. Considering water as a universal conductor and therefore as something very important for the energy to flow, we will have a chance to try to understand the importance of wetlands for the electrical environment. They are batteries. They provide energy for processes which include earth and heaven. Taking the water away will break the battery. Wetlands, peatlands, bogs, and such are considered mythical places, often misty, and going there can be dangerous. The ground might look stable, but it isn't, and the possibility of drowning in an unknown wetland is a real danger. In the past, several hundred years ago, wetlands were probably much more abundant than they are nowadays. This could mean that the overall charge in the environment was much bigger than it is today. Huge areas of wetlands were doing their thing. They created such an environment of charge that they had their own microclimate. The net negative charge, possibly due to acidity, created water vapor in the area and winds carried it into regions with less water. Wetlands are not only important for themselves but also for the surrounding areas. In other words, a dried up wetland will affect all the ecosystems surrounding it. When we think about the wetlands of the past, the huge amount of water they bore, we probably also understand that the energy confined and produced by such areas was by far bigger than it is nowadays. This is a very important point to recognize because the author thinks that the jack-o'-lantern, the pumpkin, is a representation of plasma phenomena. They occurred in peatlands probably much more often than they do nowadays. It might be something similar to St. Elmo's fire, which was described by sailors. Their appearance must have been a rather frightening experience for the onlookers, especially when the lights emitted some sound. It is not known to the author if there has been any relation to solar activity, but it would only make sense. GICs, geomagnetically induced currents, by the sun or whatever else planetary body or its tail, traveling through the crust, of which peatlands are a part of, could have charged the environment even more than usual. At a certain height above the ground, an atmospheric charge differential, geological features including metals or other conductive materials, and gas emissions from the moor created a brief accumulation of charge in the air. So much so that it started to glow. We can call them plasmoids. There might be very wide, very there. There might be a very wide variety of plasmoids. Some of them probably burn cool. Plasma has different stages, and we might look at a phenomena which goes into the realm of glow mode. The position of those ominous lights in peatlands might in certain cases be almost the same. The other thinks that it has something to do with the geological setting like the bedrock itself, which, as earlier explained, seem to form daisy chains reminiscent patterns. Other factors like temperature differences, amount of sunlight, moisture content of the atmosphere and the ground, etc., will have effects on the occurrence of the lights. They might move around, hover up and down, and change in size, shape, and color too. Something like a discharge upwards, as described in part 2 of this paper, the streamers in figure 21, which is the volcanic plasma phenomena, could probably also be expected. We also need to recognize that, depending on the atmospheric condition, hence gas mixture, it might not need very much of a current in order to get something ignited. In this case, figure 5, we are looking more at something burning instead of glowing. The paper minimum values of voltage, current, or power for the ignition of fire states. No electrical ignition will occur under conditions of zero voltage, current, power, or energy. Conversely, ignitions can occur when substantial amounts of voltage, current, power, or energy are available. This leads one to consider that there may be some lower limits for ignition to be possible. This is consistent with the general observation that for ignition to occur of substances which are not self-heating or exothermally reacting, some finite amount of external energy must be provided. There is no reason why the environment, which needs to be understood on all scales and as a whole, like Earth, Sun, galaxy, and beyond, and not just locally Earth or even just a specific area, couldn't provide unprecedented amounts of energy. Considering this thought, we should expect these kinds of phenomena to ignite fires. But since they were presumably happening in wetlands, we could imagine that fires didn't spread very far. Maybe just one burning bush. Nowadays, as we have so many dried out wetlands and the water level seems generally lower than back in the days, the possibility of underground fires ignited by induced currents, which are very hard to extinguish, is much higher. Also, common lightning strikes can ignite places which were formerly wetlands much easier. But since I've been writing this, it seems that the water is coming back in many places. The effect of fuel-air mixture on the MIE for alkene series hydrocarbons, methane, butane, propane, ethane, hexane, heptane, combustible air fraction of stoichiometric. As this graph shows, the amount of energy to ignite certain gases doesn't need much energy. The energy to make something glow might be even less. Considering also energy peaks in telluric currents, which could be understood as underground lightning, the possibility of fires breaking out many meters below the surface shouldn't come as a surprise. It is, after all, a similar mechanism which could have melted the ice and snow at the end of the last ice age. Induced energy travels underground and heats up the ground. Taking into account that in many places there was a lot of water, rarely things ignited, nor could the fire spread very far. Yes. And now, this paper has been some 2 years in the making, or maybe even more. I made some microwave experiments. I hope that you have seen them. If you haven't, check out the Finnish Copper playlist or Microwave Pebbles playlist. Induced currents. They heat stuff up. Nonetheless, we have a charged environment and strongly fluctuating telluric currents which easily can make stuff light up in different ways. The fact alone that are several ways to have something glowing in the dark is a rather strong argument for an electrical explanation of the jack-o'-lantern phenomena. Let's go quickly to something considered very finished, the Kalevala. In the first part of this paper, the author quoted a part of the Kalevala. A few sentences describe the theory of the formation of peat already then. That the aurora might have played an important role in the events is a conclusion made by the author rather recently. It is not known to the author, in scientific terms or by experiments, what actually would happen if the aurora would touch the ground. We can assume that the hot material, if the heat is maintained all the way down to the surface, we don't know. I don't know. I assume so. Would trigger some rather fast reactions in materials present on or in the ground. Things like water could experience rapid expansion, much like a phreatic volcanic eruption that could produce massive shock waves. The emitted noise of such an event should be taken in consideration too. Acoustic shock waves also carry current. Yeah, God spoke. The abundance of water in Earth must be taken into the thinking of shock waves propagating through the environment. That's from my very first paper, which came out on December 2021. 2 years ago. Well, I started with the Peat paper before this came out. Pressed compactly all the grasses that the maidens had been raking when a fire within them kindles. That's from this paper I wrote 2.5 years ago. I think this could have something to do with peat. A shockwave flattened the landscape and all biological creatures got not just instantly pulverized, they also got electrically altered and all the good stuff of it burned or crystallized. Yeah, there are like some typing mistakes. This could have happened instantaneously by the hit of the shockwave itself. Winds were carrying the dust over the land as it finally accumulated in low pressure separation bubbles by dielectric separation, or it just dropped from the sky in high pressure systems or in the regions where high pressure systems occur due to the charge of the ground. Later rain washed it into ponds. If there was any water flow, some of it got washed away. If there wasn't any, drainage by river and the bottom of the pond is sealed from the ground water flow. The material remained in place, and there it's still today. Peat is a electrolytic material, so it has had once contact with some strong electromagnetic force. Since 1/3 of the Finnish landscape is peatland, it is understandable that it might be mentioned also in mythology. But anyway, I just remembered this is going to be a very long video. That's a newer picture. That's from Canada. Because I talk quickly about Indian people. This picture I have been showing you recently. This is aurora which occurred over Iceland. And I have to talk about Iceland very soon. Anyway, here I try to explain why I think the sun is reindeering, or the origin of the saying the sun reindeers. Yeah, I put a link below to the paper. You can have a look. If you have questions or if you know something I don't, tell me. If you can point out that I am totally wrong in some places or whatsoever, and you have proof for it, tell me. I want to know. That's the reason why I make this. This is the reason for my art, or that's the purpose of the art I do. Each one teach one. We are all in this together. Learning. So, yeah, this paper is dedicated to my parents. They have left their physicality and are now part of all the circuits. Greetings to my parents. Yeah, it would be my mom's birthday today. That's the reason for why I really want to bring this paper out today. Anyway, thank you.